I had been with Keller Massey Consulting for 3 years when Catherine got the call. She had been applying for months. Different companies, different roles. And when the offer came from my firm, we celebrated like it was the best news of the year. Dinner at Bones, a bottle of wine we had no business spending money on, the whole thing. She was going to be on the operations side. I was in client strategy, different teams, different floors most of the time. We figured it was the ideal setup, close enough to grab lunch together, far enough to keep things professional. The first few weeks were exactly that. She settled in well. People liked her. I kept my distance during work hours the way we had agreed, and she did the same. It felt mature, balanced. Then Alexis Scott entered the picture. Alexis was our department head, sharp, direct, the kind of person who didn't waste words. She had been my manager for 2 of my 3 years at the firm, and we had a solid working relationship. She pushed hard, I delivered, and that was the whole equation. Nothing unusual, nothing that needed explaining. But Catherine started noticing things I hadn't even thought to notice. The first comment came on a Thursday evening. I mentioned that Alexis had pulled me into a last-minute client prep session that ran late. Catherine's response was a half smile and a quiet, "She really likes having you around, doesn't she?" I brushed it off. The second comment came the following week after a team meeting. Alexis had gone around the table, and when she got to my update, she said the rollout I had managed the previous quarter had become a model for how the team was going to approach the next one. Standard feedback, public recognition. Catherine went silent on the drive home. That night, I asked her directly if something was off. She said no, said she was just tired. I didn't push it because at that point, there was nothing concrete to push against. But I filed it away. The moment that stopped being something I could dismiss happened about 5 weeks after Catherine joined. We had an all-hands, the whole floor, both departments together, probably 40 people in the main conference room. Alexis was presenting a quarterly summary and at one point referenced a client retention strategy one had built out the previous fall. She put my name on the slide and said it directly. This came from his work, and it's been one of the better frameworks we've implemented in the past 2 years. Normal recognition. I've seen it happen with other people around me. It means something, but it's not personal. After the meeting, in the elevator going back up, Catherine didn't say a word. When I tried to start a conversation, she gave one-word answers. By the time we got to the parking garage that evening, she finally said something, not angry, measured, almost too measured. "You two have a very interesting dynamic." I asked her what that meant. She said, "Nothing. Forget it." I didn't forget it. And standing there in that parking garage, watching her get into the passenger seat without looking at me, I had the distinct feeling that whatever was starting wasn't going to stay small. It started with questions that had no business being asked. Not confrontational, not loud, just constant. "What time did Alexis call you into her office? Was it just the two of you in that meeting? Did she message you after hours?" Each one rapped in a casual tone like she was just making conversation, but there was a pattern, and patterns don't lie. I answered honestly every time. There was nothing to hide. Alexis and I worked closely because the project load demanded it. She ran strategy, I executed it, and the back and forth was part of the job. That's it. But the more I explained, the more Catherine seemed to be cataloging the information rather than accepting it. At the office, I noticed her moving differently. She started showing up on my floor more often, not to see me, or at least not only to see me. She'd stop to talk to Mason Patton from the analytics team, or hang around the kitchen near the client services wing where Cora Briggs sat. People she had no actual work reason to spend time with. I watched her work alone, with the patience of someone who wasn't in a hurry, which was new. Catherine had always been direct, sometimes blunt. This version was deliberate. I didn't say anything yet. I wanted to be wrong. The confrontation happened on Saturday. We were at her place, no particular reason for tension, and she brought up a message she had seen on my work laptop. A Slack notification from Alexis asking me to review a deck before Monday. Routine. I hadn't even responded yet. Catherine had seen the preview and built an entire narrative around it before I walked back in. She said, "You could have told me that she messages you on weekends." I said, "It's a work message on a work platform about a work deadline." She said, "You know what I mean." I said, "I actually don't. And I'd like you to say it plainly if you have something to say." She pivoted. Tears arrived quickly, too quickly, and suddenly the conversation became about her feeling overlooked, undervalued, invisible at a company where I was everyone's favorite. I didn't take the bait. I sat down, waited for it to run its course, and then told her exactly what I thought was happening. You're building a problem that doesn't exist, and you're doing it with information you're going out of your way to collect. That's not jealousy. That's a project. She told me I was being unreasonable and condescending. I told her one of us was definitely not thinking clearly, and it wasn't me. She didn't speak to me for the rest of the evening. The following Monday, I got to the office early and ran into Mason in the elevator. He was friendly enough, but there was a half-second hesitation before he said good morning. The kind of pause that means someone has said something about you that he's now trying not to think about. I filed that away too. By Wednesday, Cora stopped making eye contact in the hallway. I didn't have proof of anything yet, but whatever Catherine had been doing on those visits to my floor, it was already leaving marks. She had planted something, and it was starting to take root, and she had done it while smiling at me across the dinner table like everything was fine. Catherine went warm again. That was the part that should have unsettled me more than it did. After the Saturday argument, after the silence, she woke up Sunday acting like none of it had happened. She made coffee, suggested we drive out to Piedmont Park, was attentive and easy to be around in a way she hadn't been in weeks. I didn't trust it, but I also didn't have anything concrete in hand. So I kept my observations to myself and stayed alert. At the office, the atmosphere around me had shifted in a way I couldn't pin down precisely. Nothing dramatic. No one was hostile. No one said anything to my face. It was subtler than that. Conversations that used to run long started wrapping up faster when I joined them. Joseph Peak from compliance, who I had lunch with once a week for 2 years, started being consistently unavailable whenever I suggested it. Small things, the kind of things that don't add up to anything on their own, but feel wrong when they happen together. Alexis picked up on it before I said a word. She pulled me aside after a Wednesday briefing, not into her office, just into the small side corridor near the copy room, and asked me directly if something was going on. Not with the projects, personally. I told her I wasn't sure yet. She nodded once and said, "Okay, keep me in the loop if it becomes something." That was it. No drama, no extended conversation. She went back to her desk, and so did I. What I didn't know at the time was that Catherine had already moved past the whispering stage. She had put together screenshots, a mix of actual Slack messages pulled from context, and at least some that had been altered or constructed outright. The content suggested an inappropriate closeness between Alexis and me. Not explicit, but pointed, the kind of thing that reads as plausible if you don't know the actual context and want to believe the worst. She had sent these to Mason and Cora separately, framed as concern. I don't know what to do with this. The kind of framing that makes the other person feel like a confidant rather than a target. And she took it one step further. She requested a meeting with Florence Ray, the firm's managing director, not HR, the managing director directly. She told me she had a meeting about onboarding feedback that week. I had no reason to question it. She had been at the company for 2 months. It was a plausible enough reason. I found out later she had gone in with printed materials, organized, labeled. She had prepared for that meeting the way someone prepares a case, not a complaint. She told Florence there was a pattern of favoritism tied to a personal relationship, that she had documentation, and that she was bringing it forward because she was concerned about the integrity of the team. Florence Ray was not someone who ignored that kind of claim. She was measured, thorough, and took process seriously. She thanked Catherine, told her it would be looked into through the appropriate channels, and said nothing further. Catherine walked out of that building on a Thursday afternoon with the expression of someone who believed she had just set a clock ticking. She had. She just had the wrong person in her sights. It was a Wednesday night, and Catherine had left her MacBook open on the kitchen counter. She was in the shower. I had come in to refill my water and wasn't looking for anything, wasn't suspicious in that specific moment, just tired after a long day. But the screen was on, and the window, facing me, was a conversation thread. Her name at the top, a contact saved as Savannah K., her college roommate, someone I had met twice. And the message sitting there in the middle of the screen, unread by me up until that second, was detailed enough that I stopped moving entirely. Savannah had written, "Did Florence say anything yet? Do you know if they're actually opening a formal review?" And above that, Catherine's last message, "Not yet." But she took the folder, all of it. The screenshots, the timeline, everything. It's in their hands now. He has no idea. I read it twice. Then I took my phone out of my pocket and photographed the screen. I went back to the living room and sat down. She came out of the shower 20 minutes later, hair wrapped in a towel, and walked right past me to the bedroom. I waited. When she came back out, I was still sitting there with my phone face down on my knee. And I looked at her the way you look at someone when the version of them you thought you knew has just been replaced by something else entirely. I said, "How long have you been building a case against me?" She stopped. Her expression shifted through about 3 different things in under 2 seconds before landing on something that tried to look confused. What are you talking about? Don't. I picked up my phone, opened the photo, and held it up. You left it open. The confused look dropped. What replaced it wasn't guilt. It was calculation. She was deciding how to handle this, not processing the fact that she had been caught. That told me everything about how long this had been going on. She said, I was concerned about what I was seeing. I had every right. You fabricated messages, Catherine. You put together a folder with altered screenshots and walked it into Florence Ray's office to try to get me removed from this film. I kept my voice level, not because I was calm, but because losing that level meant she got to reframe this as an argument instead of an actual was. You used Mason and Cora to spread it first, and you took it to the top. That's not concern. That's a coordinated move against someone you supposedly love. You don't know what you saw. I know exactly what I saw, and I have it saved. I stood up. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to contact my attorney in the morning. I'm going to request a meeting with Florence before this week is out, and I'm going to walk in there with everything, the originals, the metadata, the actual Slack logs that your screenshots were supposed to replace. I picked up my jacket from chair, and you're going to sit here tonight and think very carefully about what you thought was going to happen when all of this landed. She tried one more time. The voice went softer, the posture shifted, the version of her that had always been. Able to redirect the conversation by changing its temperature. You're overreacting. We could talk about this. We're done talking. I said it without raising my voice, without hesitation. We're done. Period. I want you out of this apartment by the weekend. She stared at me for a long moment. And I think some part of her was waiting for me to walk it back, to soften, to leave a door open the way I apparently had every other time she had pushed past a line. I didn't. I grabbed my keys and walked out. And I spent that night at Damon Keller's place 2 miles away, running through every document I had access to on my work drive, building a timeline that was going to be airtight before I set foot in Florence Ray's office. She had spent weeks constructing something designed to quietly remove me from her firm. I was going to dismantle it in a single meeting. I didn't sleep much at Damon's. Didn't try to. I was at his kitchen table by 2 o'clock in the morning with my laptop open, a cup of coffee going cold next to me, and 3 years of work correspondence pulled up across every window I had. The thing about working in strategy consulting is that you document everything. Every client decision, every internal recommendation, every message thread that touches a deliverable gets logged and timestamped. It's not a habit, it's the job. And that night, that habit was the difference between walking into Florence Ray's office with a story and walking into the case. I pulled every Slack export I had access to. Every email chain between Alexis and me going back 18 months, project briefs, revision histories, meeting minutes. I built a timeline, a clean, linear, date-stamped record of every interaction that Catherine had tried to reframe as something inappropriate. Each one had a corresponding deliverable attached, a deck, a client report, a deadline, context that made the nature of the communication undeniable to anyone who read it without an agenda. Then I went back to the photo I had taken of Catherine's screen and looked at it carefully. The message to Savannah referenced screenshots and a timeline, which meant she had assembled her own document. What I needed to establish was that her version couldn't survive contact with the originals. Not just that mine was more credible, but that hers was demonstrably constructed. Metadata would handle most of it. Any IT team worth anything could pull the creation dates and modification history off those files in under an hour. By 5:30, I had a folder organized, printed, and clipped. 14 pages, clean margins. I'm not a lawyer, but I put together enough client presentations to know what a persuasive document looks like. This one was tight. I texted Alexis at 7:15. Not a call, a text, because I needed her to have a written record of me reaching out before the workday started. I kept it simple. There's something I need to bring to your attention before we're both in a building. Can we talk this morning before 9 o'clock? She responded in 4 minutes. My office at 8 o'clock. Coffee's on me. I got there at 7:55. Alexis closed the door behind me, sat down, and listened without interrupting for the better part of 15 minutes. I walked her through the timeline, showed her the photo of Catherine's message to Savannah, and laid out what I believed had already been submitted to Florence. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I had a meeting with Florence last week. She asked me some questions about our working relationship. I thought it was a routine check-in. She paused. It wasn't routine, was it? No, I said, it wasn't. Alexis leaned back and looked at the ceiling for exactly 3 seconds. I counted because it was the only time in 2 years I had ever seen her need a moment. Then she looked back at me and said, "I want to be in that meeting with Florence. Whatever you're walking in there with, I want to be sitting next to you when you present it." That was not a small offer. Alexis putting herself in that room meant the firm's head of strategy was personally corroborating my account. Catherine had gone to Florence with a folder. I was going with a folder and a witness who outranked her by Florence. We got time with Florence that same afternoon at 2 o'clock. Florence Ray ran that firm the way a surgeon runs an operator. Everything deliberate, nothing wasted. She was in her late 50s, had built the Atlanta office from a regional branch into one of the top-performing locations in the company, and had a reputation for being completely unmovable once she had made up her mind about something. Walking into her office felt like walking into a room where the temperature was controlled by someone else entirely. She already had Catherine's folder on her desk. I could see the edge of it under a legal pad. I set my 14 pages down without being asked and said, "I'd like to walk you through what actually happened." Florence nodded once. "Go ahead." I went through it methodically. The timeline first, every communication between Alexis and me with the corresponding project deliverables attached. Then the context of each one. Then the pattern of Catherine's behavior at the office, the floor visits, the conversations with Mason and Cora, the escalated questions at home. Then the photo of the screen, then the specific language Catherine had used, "He has no idea," which indicated deliberate concealment, not a good faith concern. Alexis spoke for about 5 minutes, calm and precise. She confirmed every project reference, confirmed the nature of our working relationship, and told Florence directly that at no point had there been anything personal between them outside of professional context. She also mentioned that the questions Florence had asked her the previous week had felt unusual and that she now understood why. Florence listened to all of it. She looked at my documents. She looked at Catherine's folder. She asked 3 questions, specific technical questions about the metadata issue, about the timeline gaps in Catherine's version, and about whether I had any direct communication from Catherine that acknowledged what she had done. I showed her the photo again and let her read it twice. When Florence finally sat back, she said, "I owe you an apology for not coming to you directly before this progressed as far as it did." I told her I understood the process. She said, "HR will be in contact with her tomorrow morning, the way someone closes a file. Final, definitive. No ambiguity about what came next." I walked out of that office at 3:40 and stood in the hallway for a moment. Not to celebrate. There was nothing about any of this that felt worth celebrating. But there was a particular kind of clarity that comes when something you spent weeks trying to hold together finally stops needing to be held. The weight just goes. And standing there in that corridor, I felt exactly that. Catherine had walked into that building 2 months ago with a job offer and what I thought was a shared future. She had spent those 2 months dismantling everything she could reach from the inside, quietly, methodically, with a smile on her face every evening when I came home. Tomorrow morning, HR was going to make a call, and she was going to find out exactly what happens when the person you tried to remove had 3 years of records and nowhere to be except right there and then. HR called her at 9:17 on a Friday morning. I know the exact time because I was already at my desk when Kenneth Marshall, the firm's HR director, walked past my office toward a conference room on the east side of the floor. He had a folder under his arm and the measured pace of someone who had done this before and had no intention of making it dramatic. 2 minutes later, I saw Catherine come off the elevator. She was in a blazer, hair done, moving with the kind of deliberate composure that told me she had prepared for this. She thought she was being called in to receive an update on her complaint, maybe a formal acknowledgement, maybe news that a review had been opened against me and Alexis. She walked into that conference room with the expression of someone expecting a victory lap. I went back to my screen and kept working. What happened inside that room, I only know from the documented account that HR shared with me afterward as part of the formal resolution process. Kenneth opened by telling her that her complaint had been thoroughly reviewed. He then informed her that the investigation had uncovered significant discrepancies between the materials she had submitted and the verified communication records pulled directly from the firm's servers. It had flagged 3 screenshots in a folder as altered, 2 with modified timestamps, 1 with text that had no corresponding entry in the original message box. Kenneth placed the comparison side by side in front of her and asked if she wanted to respond. She asked if she could call someone first. Kenneth told her she was welcome to contact anyone she needed to after the meeting concluded. The meeting wasn't over. He then informed her that submitting falsified documentation to a managing director as part of an internal misconduct complaint constituted a terminable offense under the firm's code of conduct, specifically the section covering fraudulent reporting and workplace integrity violations. He slid a single page across the table. Her termination letter, already signed by Florence. She was given 20 minutes to collect her personal items from her desk. I heard about the 20 minutes secondhand from Joseph Peak, who had been at the coffee station near her workstation when she came out of that conference room. He told me later, with no particular satisfaction in his voice, just the flat delivery of someone reporting what he saw. She came out of the room, stood at her desk for a moment without moving, then started putting things into her bag without making eye contact with anyone. Mason was at his desk 10 feet away. Cora was across the floor. Neither of them said anything to her. The people she had spent weeks cultivating as allies, the ones she had pulled into her confidence with her screenshots and whispered concerns, they watched her pack her bag in complete silence. She passed my office on the way to the elevator. The door was open. She slowed for just a second. I don't know if it was involuntary or if she was deciding whether to say something. I looked up from my screen. We held eye contact for maybe 3 seconds. I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. She kept walking. The elevator doors closed, and that was the last time I saw Catherine in that building. Florence called me into her office that afternoon. She told me the firm was formally closing the complaint with a finding of no misconduct on my part or Alexis's. She told me that the documentation I had brought to the meeting the previous day had been instrumental in the speed and clarity of the resolution. Then she said something I hadn't expected. She told me that the way I had handled the situation, coming forward proactively, presenting the evidence without making it personal, keeping Alexis in the loop rather than going around her, reflected well on my judgment. She said those weren't qualities that went unnoticed at the director level. I thanked her and didn't read more into it than what it was. The weeks after, they were quieter than I expected. I had braced for some residual awkwardness, the kind that lingers after something like this moves through a team. There was some of it, mostly from Mason, who clearly felt embarrassed about the role he had unknowingly played. He apologized to me directly one morning in the hallway, short and straightforward. I told him I didn't hold it against him. He had been given information without context. That was on her and not him. He seemed relieved. We had lunch the following week, and it was back to normal by the time the check came. Cora took a little longer, but she got there too. Catherine sent me 2 messages in the 10 days after she was let go. The first one arrived the evening of that Friday. Long, a full explanation of why she had done what she did. Something about feeling invisible and afraid of losing me and making decisions from a place of desperation. The second one came 4 days later, shorter, asking if we could meet and talk. I read both of them once and didn't respond to either. There was nothing in either message that changed what had happened. She hadn't made a mistake in a moment of panic. She had built a structured, documented, multi-week operation to have me removed from my position. You don't accidentally do that. You decide to. I had my attorney send her a formal cease and desist after the second message. Nothing came after that. The apartment felt different after she moved her things out. Not empty in a bad way, just returned to what it had been before. My space, my pace, my decisions. I spent a Saturday morning reorganizing the second bedroom. Went hiking out at Kennesaw Mountain in the afternoon. Came home and ordered from the Thai place on Peachtree that she had never liked. It was an unremarkable day by most measures. That was the point. Some people spend years letting someone take up space in their life that was never offered in the first place. I had given Catherine access to my home, my professional environment, my reputation, and she had treated all 3 as material for something she was building against me. The moment I understood that everything else was just process, documentation, meetings, timelines, necessary steps, not emotional ones. She had walked into that firm believing she was setting something in motion that I wouldn't see coming. The folder she handed Florence Ray ended up being the most detailed case I ever built. Just not the one she intended. Look, she didn't just get jealous. She put together a whole operation, folder, screenshots, a meeting with the managing director. I mean, at that point, it stopped being a relationship problem and became a full-time job. And the remarkable part? He was right there the whole time, working, doing nothing wrong, completely unaware that someone who shared his home was building a case against him at the same company. I think the lesson here is pretty straightforward. When someone shows you that they'd rather bring you down than lose you, believe them the first time, and then document everything. Don't forget to leave a like. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, what you thought about this story, and what you would have done differently. I really enjoy reading your comments. That's it for now. I'll see you in the next video. See you.